All right, Rob Brown here with you on this Monday morning. Cold one up here in Memphis. A lot to talk about. College basketball, national signing date, part 2, the closer coming up. That's going to be a week from Wednesday, February 7th. We'll have Jason Caldwell, Auburn Undercover, on talking about that. Coach Matt Dean from Memphis and Franz Beard, GatorbaitMedia.com. We'll look at the big picture in the SEC. Basketball, football, baseball, they're already cranking up. It's about to start in the next 2 weeks. You'll see college baseball, and we will be covering it. As I say, we cover the SEC like kudzu and cotton. We have a lot of fun with it. Brendan Martin, our executive producer, is in the studio, and we'll be right back in just a few seconds with the show.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
What a weekend it was in sports. Basketball. Watched the NFL playoffs yesterday. The Detroit Lions. That was brutal. Jason, you probably have watched a few Falcons games over the years. The way the Lions just collapsed in the second half reminded me a lot of that Patriots Super Bowl with the Falcons. That was brutal to watch. But man, NFL football, it's another world, totally different.
Yeah.
But all right, I want to get started and talking with you about Auburn basketball. Somebody sent a stat out to me yesterday about life on the road in basketball. I think it was maybe the top 10 teams. And I don't like losing. Nobody does. The players hate it, and the coaches more than anybody. Auburn's not getting blown out by 30 or 40 in these road games. The Alabama game was back and forth in that second half. Mississippi State, they shot 33%. I think I was reading on Auburn Undercover, one of your writers, maybe it was you, just said if Auburn can hold serve at home and then win 5 on the road, 14-4 very likely is going to win the SEC. You go on the road, it's different. But what's the takeaway from these 2 losses that makes you think things are going to get better, and what do they need to fix?
Yeah, it is. It's life on the road in college basketball. It's not just Auburn. It's not just the SEC. I mentioned it this morning. Kansas is 1-3 on the road in the Big 12. Houston's got losses. UConn. I mean, the teams that everybody thinks they're. Here's what I've said, and I think we talked about it last week. The last couple of years in college basketball have shown us the blueprint, which is, hey, there are no great teams. There's a bunch of good teams. There's not a great team out there. And I think it was even true in football. Like I said, Michigan was a really good football team. I don't think they were, if you start stacking them up against the greatest teams of all time, I don't think they're there.
No.
They're good.
Yeah.
I think we've seen more parity across the board. And I admit I was completely wrong. I thought that the transfer portal NIL would make the rich get richer. And instead, it's only, to me, watered out everything. I think there's more teams capable of winning. And in basketball, I think that shows up more than anywhere because it only takes a few players. And so I think there's 25 or 30 teams that I look at right now and go, Could that team make a run in the NCAA tournament?
Mhm.
Probably. Just depends on the matchup. And Auburn's still one of those teams. And so, I just think it's just when there's nobody great and everybody's pretty good, you're going to have a bunch of these games.
And you talked about it. Auburn probably doesn't have an NBA player on the roster, at least not one yet.
No, right now. Mm-hmm.
Got some good talent. I mean, they got 11 guys. They can rotate around a lot. And you look at Mississippi State, that loss. That's not an easy place to play. Never has been. The Hump, and it never will be. It's old, and they take a lot of pride in the fact that it is old. It's not the most up to date, but it's you think about these pits. Growing up watching like we all did. SEC basketball, when you compared it to Big East basketball, the Cat House at Villanova, where they're right on top of you, these smaller venues, like the Big East, that's what comes to mind with me. Of course, we think of the Carrier Dome, that's totally different. But everybody's getting into making their home environments just damn near impossible to win in. So I'm with you. I mean, I just sent Brendan that stat, but it's the top 10 teams in basketball. I mean, UConn, it doesn't matter who you are, but the one that jumped out right there, Kansas, one of the Blue Bloods, 1-3 on the road in the Big 12. Got a bunch of people have been asking me this question. Ryan Williams recommits to Alabama. I know he's still out there because he hadn't signed. He's going to sign on his birthday, I think Friday, February 9th. Besides him, who are some other targets that Auburn may be able to grab for that February 7th, a week from Wednesday signing date?
Yeah, there's nobody. That's the way it is. There's about 3 guys left in the country to sign, and that's pretty much it. And so, no, it'll be, Auburn has already moved on to 2025, and they had, with the exception of Ryan Williams. Demetri Nicholas is a guy that Auburn had a commitment from. They did not sign in December. It does not look like he's going to sign in February either. And so I think Auburn will move on there. So, no, it's pretty much just another day for most every team in the country, with the exception of a few. When you have coaching changes, some of those things, you'll have a few left. But, no, for Auburn, you kind of move on. And, the next thing to watch for Auburn will be what the portal looks like after spring practice. Yeah. Do you lose a few? Do you go try to gain a few more? How that shakes out, that'll be the next thing in terms of other than, they'll get commitments, things like that in the 25, 26 class. But as far as the ink on paper kind of things, it won't be until that next transfer portal window.
When Ryan Williams decommitted from Alabama, that was like a lot of drama, and then he recommits, and the crystal ball predictions are still out there. I mean, what is it? Auburn's got 2 5-star receivers. Then they've got Bryce Kane, got Malcolm Simmons, of course, along with Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman. What's your thought? I mean, he's recommitted to Alabama. That's got to mean something, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it's over with.
Yeah. Okay.
And I thought, quite honestly, and I said it when it happened, I thought the worst thing for Auburn's chances happened when Nick Saban retired. Had Nick Saban still been in Tuscaloosa, I think Ryan Williams probably winds up at Auburn, to be quite honest. Yeah. I think the worst thing was when that happened. You had the exodus of players, you had a change, and then I think folks in Tuscaloosa realized we can't let this guy get away. And so it became everything. We got to do everything we can to keep him there. I think that was part of it. Yeah. And then the other thing, quite honestly, and it's crazy to think about right now because of what we've seen for the last 10 to 15 years, is honestly an easier selling point in Tuscaloosa for a wide receiver right now than it was Auburn, because they're going, look, we need you more than they do. And that's crazy to think about. But Auburn's situation, it's all young. Mm-hmm. But Auburn had more of those guys than Alabama does at the moment. And so I think they were able to sell, hey, we need you more than they do. And it's something you never would have dreamed about even just a few months ago.
Yeah, and I was telling Brendan right before, our executive producer, before we came on the air, I said they probably just took all that money that they would have been spending on these other guys that are gone, and they've got tons of cash for NIL to go get Ryan. And then you're right. Hey, look at Auburn. They're stacked. And, of course, that's great that Auburn has those kind of players. So you move on from that. And again, we all know with the way kids are today, they sign with you. I mean, that means that they're there physically at the moment, but after lunch, something may make them mad, and they're in the portal.
Well, especially now, when you think about, I don't know what it would take to not get cleared and for them to go, hey, no, we're not going to let you transfer. I mean, I thought about this over the weekend, and I meant to mention about this morning, but seeing a Miami player that got a 9th year.
Yeah.
And I thought about, Corvatney Barber that played basketball at Auburn, who did not get another year because he played 12 minutes too many back in the mid 2000s. The guy he played 12 minutes too many, got injured. The rest of his season was done, and he did not get a year back. And now we've got a guy that gets his 9th year to play at Miami.
Yeah.
Times have changed a great deal in terms of the NCAA.
They really have. And that Cam Carmack is the guy's name. He signed originally with Oregon. Now he's at Miami, 9th year. I like to say that guy is in his first year as a medical school as a resident. That's what he is, 9 years. All right. We talked about it briefly. There's so much to cover. Basketball, the football. Before I go back to football, I want to ask you about baseball. One of my friends on a text who knows Auburn baseball really well talked about Auburn's pitching staff. In past years, have they pitched a lot before the season compared to what they've done? What's different about them this year?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference this year is under Everett Teaford and Scott Foxhall came back. So you got 3 pitching coaches really, but Everett Teaford's a guy that was a development guy in Major League Baseball. So he handled all the minor league pitchers for Major League, and he pitched in the big leagues too. And at that level, you have guys that ramp up all year to get ready for a season. In college baseball, you can't do that because of a calendar. Yeah. But he basically asked his guys, hey, look, don't take as much time off over the Christmas holidays. You need to keep throwing so we don't have to start over again. And that's been the case for college programs, almost having to start over again, especially for Joseph Gonzalez, who's coming back out. He had shoulder surgery last year, pitched opening day, 5 innings. That was it. Tried to get him back up a few times and wouldn't work. He basically had some cleanup done on his shoulder, which had been bothering him back since high school in Puerto Rico. And he ramped up all the way through. So all the way through Thanksgiving, he was little by little. And so they're able to start hitting the ground running and throwing to live hitters the last few weeks. So they're already throwing to live hitters. Joseph Gonzalez threw into the 3rd inning through 40 pitches on the first day of intersquads. Yeah. That's probably normally what they in 10 years ago, that's what a college pitcher threw on opening day of the season. Yeah. And so, they're further ahead. The batters are further ahead because of that. But they've definitely extended things and sped up the process a little bit more than they had in the past. Yeah.
And you look at college baseball's popularity. Last year, talking to Butch Thompson, he comes on about now through late June. He comes on the show with us, and he talked a lot about his top 3 pitchers late in the season had thrown maybe a combined 14 innings because of injuries. It's still the toughest. It's like the quarterback, the point guard, and the pitchers. Glad to see Joseph Gonzalez coming back. Football wise, I hate seeing Trevon Reed leaving, but he also he's in this to get a job he's now going to coach cornerbacks for Gus down at UCF. But he was really important in trying to keep things rolling. Now Auburn's got Will Redmond coming in. Is Will Redmond going to kind of do a lot of what Trevon Reed was doing?
No, Will Redmond's going to do what everybody does. I mean, like he does everything. Like he is over the recruiting department. Like he'll be the guy. He won't just be a guy that does a little bit of things. He's going to be the guy that runs the show. And it's not recruiting, it's scouting. You have to have so many people involved in terms of a recruiting department, scouting department to prepare for the portal, all those things. It's now, 15, 20 years ago, you might have had 4 or 5 people in a recruiting department, and that handled everything you did. Now you have to have 30 people because of everything that has to be done in terms of, scouting, portal, recruiting, trying to get ahead, all the things that go on. It's changed the game. And now this is a guy that will be over kind of that side of things for Auburn. And you think about a general manager for the NFL and what those guys do.
Yeah.
Some general managers, they go, hey, you have say-so, you do everything. My guess is that he will be heavily involved in going, okay, here's some guys, the assistant coaches take a look at them, all these things. So it basically takes some of the stuff off of everybody's plate, and then he will have people that help him do those jobs.
So you've got the NIL collectives. There are a lot of questions people are constantly asking, specifically with Auburn. You've got On to Victory, Ever to Conquer. And the coaches in the university don't have anything to do with NIL, but is Tigers Unlimited, have they merged with these collectives? How's that working?
I don't think that's happened yet. They're still not in-house.
Okay.
So you can't, and there's talk about it, and I think it's going to happen. But as of right now, they're still not on campus, housed in the athletic department kind of things. And so now they have done an On to Victory, War Eagle Plus kind of subscription model thing to go hand in hand a little bit, but they're not where it's like, well, the university makes these decisions on who's getting what NIL money. It's still not there yet, but I think it's coming. I don't think there's any question that that's what's going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah. All right. So football heading in spring practice. Any date yet for when it starts?
Yeah, it's supposed to be the last week of February, I think. So the spring break for Auburn is that the 3rd or 4th through the 9th of March or whatever. I think they'll practice the week before that.
Okay.
And get that first 3 or 4 days in, then they'll have spring break and then they'll come back. So I think it's supposed to start at the end of February.
Okay. I know you got a lot going on today, so we'll be a couple more questions and we'll let you go. Number one thing you're looking for in the spring with the offense, and number one thing you're looking for with the defense. And don't forget special teams.
I think special teams is probably in as good a shape as you can get when you think about Alex McPherson coming back. You add in Towns Magoo, who comes in from Auburn High Schools on campus, and you have Oscar Chapman back as well. So pretty good group of specialists there. Defensively, kind of figuring out who it's going to be. Will Charles Kelly be the play caller, and will you find another assistant coach? Will it be a DJ Durkin kind of guy? I think we're going to get some clarity on that really quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if we got clarity on that today.
Okay.
I think they'll start, now you start to move forward with that now that you've gotten through all these things. You get ready to start doing some meetings and things to get ready for the spring. So I think we'll get some clarity on that. Defensively, it's just kind of putting the pieces in place. The newcomers that you brought in, you got a lot of freshman linebackers. The secondary group is probably the one. Now you got some new faces on the front defensive line too, but the secondary group and how it shakes out. Keontae Scott's back, but Kayan Lee, and then you got Colton Hood and Terrence Love and Tyler Scott, Sylvester Smith, J.C. Hart. That's a group of young, talented guys. Brought in a couple of newcomers, a guy like Jaron Thompson from Texas as a safety. Okay. How do you put all those pieces together? And then offensively, it's all going to point toward a quarterback, wide receivers. That Cam Coleman, Bryce Kane, and then you have the 2 transfer wide receivers so you have 4 new wide receiver transfers on campus as scholarship players this spring to kind of hit the ground running with them. And then, 4 quarterbacks, including newcomer Walker White. So there's going to be a lot of reps, a lot of things to try to get done and worked out in a 15 practice day window.
Okay. Brendan, I don't know if you've talked with Jason Caldwell before, but Brent, we're building the Sideline Sports Network. So we want to definitely make you part of that, where people can go to our website that we're building on this thing and tap into you, because I cannot tell you how much we appreciate what you do, Jason, and everybody at Auburn Undercover, because I think you use that term OG a lot, but Mark Murphy, I wish I could find that copy, the 1981 edition inside the Auburn Tigers, the first issue, because I was in Auburn on the way back from the beach, and I got Coach Dye to sign it before his first game. Remember, he was wearing that kind of faded light blue short sleeve shirt and the blue pants and the whistle. Yep. I would love to find a copy of that stuff. But look, let people know, if you would, how they can follow you and keep up with you, and look forward to having you back on next week. Again, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you can check us out at auburnundercover.com, part of the 24/7 network. And you can also follow me on Twitter at ITATJason. Got tons of stuff coming up. Obviously, basketball going on, recruiting. We'll be at the Senior Bowl full group tomorrow to have thoughts from the 4 Senior Bowl guys down in Mobile this week. So we'll have all that coverage as well coming up.
Hey, look, appreciate it. Have a great trip. You put in more miles than anyone I know in the media. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
All right. And Brendan, listen, Jason has been part of, and Mark Murphy inside the Auburn Tigers since 1981. And now inside the Auburn Tigers is Auburn Undercover, but they do a phenomenal job of covering all this stuff. And, you're talking about, you heard what he said about recruiting, and that makes sense. I mean, Ryan Williams, hey, Alabama had a lot of guys leave from their recruiting class. And I think now he's right. As crazy as that sounds, Nick Saban leaving made it more likely that he would go to Alabama. But that's Jason. He's very smart, very insightful.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's good to hear from those guys down there because it's hard to cover all, to get into the recruiting stuff and just to get a quick glimpse of basketball, especially. Yeah, it's hard to get it all in the SEC. That's what you get here on this show right here. That's right, Rob. Did you know that?
That's right.
That's right. And just so you know, if you want to want more of this show, there's a little button at the bottom. YouTube thing pops up. Click it, hit subscribe, and you can get content and stuff for that we offer for free. Notified right to your phone. Hey, we got Franz and Matt in the green room.
Bring them in. Dueling banjos.
I feel like it's dangerous to bring them in at the same time, but we'll give it a shot. Here we go.
Here we go. Franz and Matt Dean here on Sidelines Monday morning. Man, we were just talking with Jason Caldwell, Auburn Undercover. You got football recruiting coming up, which is really a non-event for most schools, February 7th. But basketball in full gear and baseball about to crank up. Matt, you know this, and all of y'all, as a coach, here you are. You're about a third of the way through the conference season in basketball. If you can't shoot the ball, you can't shoot free throws 6 games into an 18-game conference schedule, are you likely to be able to do it better by, the next game and throughout the season? I mean, are you what you are right now? How likely is it that these teams that are struggling with free throw shooting and don't play good defense are going to get a whole lot better?
Well, good morning, guys. It's great to be back on. First of all, let me just address that. I've had some great teams that have had some what I call spells at the foul line. And sometimes in those situations, if it's not in late game situations, one of the things we always try to do when we had the lead is put the ball in the hands of our best foul shooter. That's number one. I don't know what reference you're talking to about here. But let me tell you, I talked to a college basketball official yesterday. I was working our game, and we get a lot of upper-level officials that work different games on the weekend. So this particular gentleman works for the Big 12, right?
Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, tell me what you're seeing in college basketball, Power 5. You're doing a lot of games. He goes, Matt, everybody's broken. I go, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, there are a lot of great teams, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing really truly complete that I'm seeing. And he kind of referenced the fact that with our new NIL and portal, everybody's jumping. There's less continuity out there, and you're going to have some situations where some teams are going to have to get better to meet their goals. And I'll give you a great example. I think Auburn's really good. They had a tough week. I mean, and you know what? If I'm not mistaken, Rob, both those games were on the road. And in college football and pro football, I've always felt like the line of scrimmage is so important. It doesn't matter where the venue. I'm going to kick your butt if I'm playing in Gainesville. If I'm better than all players. In basketball, you got people on top of each other. It's loud. When you're trying to shoot a free throw, you got people throwing, but they're waving at you. It's different. And you got to be a little mentally tougher. And you're going to absorb some losses in college basketball on the road. That's just the way it is, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the crowds are right on top of you. They're smaller venues, obviously, but that noise, when you get to 9,000 or 10,000, that's where the noise is the loudest. A football stadium, 50 to 60,000. Once you get past 60 in those upper decks, that's not the problem. It's the lower bowl where the noise is. And
Sure.
it's interesting what you said. And Franz come back here. We lost Franz there for a second, but when you're talking to these officials and you're asking them, they say everybody's broke. But it looks to me like that, and Franz, jump on this. The offense, it's pass it around, push it in, kick it back out, look for the open three. It's pretty much the same offense. Franz, you love basketball like Matt does, and you've been writing about it for a long time. Am I right to say that it's pretty much copycat what we see?
It was a better game when it was played below the rim. And I say that because when, 1974, North Carolina State beats UCLA in the semifinals, double overtime game in which North Carolina State comes from behind twice to beat Bill Walton and then beats Marquette in the championship. There was no dunk allowed then. They had taken the dunk away basically because of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because everybody said nobody will ever be able to stop him if we don't do it. So all he did was invent the skyhook. And
wait a minute, that's pretty cool, Franz. That is the cool. Rewind that again. That's a pivotal moment in basketball.
Well,
that's a cool story.
If you look at what happened here, when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came along, they took the dunk out of basketball, and it was out of basketball basically until Michael Jordan came along just before it. It was, I think there was about a 15-year period in which there was no dunking allowed. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And what happened when there was no dunking allowed? The game was played below the rim. North Carolina State invented the alley-oop. Monty Tao, who lives here in Gainesville, coaches at Oak Hall High School. He's semi-retired. He coaches tennis, he teaches tennis, and coaches Oak Hall's basketball team. Monty Tao, all 5'5" of them, who would hold the record for three-point shooting if they had it then. They didn't have that. You had to move the basketball. Do the greatest game, and you can watch the ACC network, and they periodically bring it. They periodically show it. A video called "The Greatest Game Ever Played," and it was North Carolina State and Maryland for the ACC championship in 1974. 103-100 in overtime.
Yeah.
Both teams shot 60%. Not a single walking call, charging call, 3-second call, or offensive foul in the entire game. And people find it hard to believe the defense was incredible. Tommy Burleson had the game of his life. He lit up Lenny Elmore for 39 points that game. And in overtime, it was just unbelievable. What a ball game that was. Played below the rim. 3-point shot. So the ball had to move. Now it's kick it out, shoot a three. Alabama the other night shot 34 threes in its game with LSU. And for Alabama would have shot more, except they got so many points in transition because LSU's defense was so bad. The game is a different game now, and the three-point shot I don't think has helped. I like the dunks somewhat, but at the same time, for every spectacular dunk we have, it seems somebody blows a dunk. We had two Georgia guys on a fast break blow a dunk against Florida. I wonder if they look at the film, they might think, if I just laid that damn ball in, we could have won.
Yeah,
you're
right.
Gosh.
Let me say something real quick about one of our sponsors. I just got this text. I love that story because it makes total sense. January 29th, that is today, through February 11th, Redcon 1, buy one, get one free at the Vitamin Shop. LSOPURE, 20% off. Clean, simple eats, 20% off. All month, $129, to February 22nd, the Vitamin Shop, buy one, get one 50. And that is 5338 Goodman Road in Olive Branch, Mississippi. They're going to also be opening in Oxford February 12th. We're going to be down there March 2nd for a big deal. And hopefully Jackson Dart can join us down there, the Ole Miss quarterback on the square. That's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, the Vitamin Shop open Monday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sundays, 10:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Matt, you just heard what Franz talked about, and the dunk was taken out. Then it came. We all, as kids, and I'm not a basketball player, but we all did the Kareem Abdul, Lou Alcindor. God, I'd give anything if I could find my old Lou Alcindor card from the Milwaukee Bucks. But man, the game. You look at it today. You go to an NBA game. You got guys like Kevin Durant that can post up and drain 3-point shots all night long. Talk about how we used to have 7-foot centers. Everybody wanted a 7. Ole Miss has the smallest player in D1 basketball at 5'5" and the tallest player at 7'5". They go the complete extreme.
Well, Franz is right. The game, I'd say, this kind of started with some of Calipari when he was at Memphis. A lot of coaches went to what they call the dribble drive. And basically it's spacing the floor. I put my head down. I'm going to get to the rim. If you stop me, I'm going to kick for a 3-point shot. Okay?
Yeah.
And if I come out with a late contest, I'm going to dribble hard at you. And it just is a continuous pattern. So coaches had to combat that with different versions of, we're not going to switch anything. We're going to play a little bit of a zone and force you to stay in a spot and shoot instead of beating us off the dribble, right? And then you go back when I played basketball back in the 80s, we didn't have the 3-point shot yet. So it's a lot different game with a 3-point shot because essentially when you go into a scouting report from a coaching perspective, you're trying to run people off the 3-point line. Go back to when Bobby Knight had his great teams and the undefeated team, I believe it was in 76. A lot of motion-based offense, a lot of read and react stuff, a lot of cutting, a lot of move without the basketball, pure game, the post, the high post. There were elements of the game. Go back to Denny Crum, Louisville, the great 2-guard offense they used to run with Duckins in a low block. Franz is exactly right. The post presence is practically non-existent. And part of it is it's not the offensive side. If I got a big guy that can score, that's great. But if he has to guard someone that can shoot the 3 and he can't get out there, 3 is greater than 2. So it's changed the whole thought process of how you prep for a game and how you recruit for your roster and manage your roster. So, I agree. It's a much different game. We've had some great coaches leave us in the last few years. I talk about Jay Wright all the time. Obviously, Coach K. But it's different to me because a lot of times most rosters you watch, we just play with a bunch of guards. It's a much different game. And the teams that have that post presence, most of those guys got to have the ability to face the basket, what I call shoot the ball from the perimeter.
Well, and you look at great shooting guards. How many great shooting guards do we have, guys, that average 25 points a game? The standard when I was growing up was, say, Milt Wagner, Darrell Griffith, Dr. Duncanstein, and then a guy that I always remember from 1980-81 when they played Bob Weltlich and the Ole Miss Rebels in the tournament, Darnell Valentine from Kansas. The guy had thighs as big as Earl Campbell, and he could just drain it from forever. Locally, watching Memphis, watching Philip Doom Haynes use that backboard, the great Otis Jackson, but a pure shooter, Franz. Give me your top 3 pure shooters who are fundamentally sound and also play defense in college basketball. Are there 3 of them?
Yeah. Kentucky has a freshman that's as good as there is. They bring him off the bench, and I guess it's because they promised other guys that they could start. But the best player on the Kentucky basketball team is Reed Sheppard, who's hitting 54% from 3. He doesn't turn it over. He's their best assist guy. He's their best fundamental defensive player. This kid will break you down and spit you out. He on defense, he is that good. But yeah, he from a pure shooting standpoint, he can do it. I'll tell you what, Florida's got a shooter who can also jump, and that is a kid named Will Richard. Will Richard can flat out shoot the basketball. But you know, he would not be. Runs hot. He runs cold. I like the freshman they've got at Baylor a lot. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. R.J. Davis at North Carolina. I think he's a little bit too much of a volume shooter for me, but he's what Carolina needs. He's really good. Mark Sears up at Alabama. I think in a more conventional offense, you would be talking about him as a pure shooter. But the way they just, it's just fling it down the court. First guy who touches it, let it rip. It's good. It's good for the fans. Makes a lot of difference for the fans, etc., like that. But you got a problem with it, and that when the game gets into the tournament, the game slows down about 20%.
Yeah,
typically so.
Yeah,
and I don't know that Alabama is built for the tournament. Last year they were a number 1 seed, but they weren't built for the tournament, and they got smoked. Yeah. I don't know that style is going to work. You have to be able to play every style out there. And I think the best guy who does that actually is John Calipari. I think John Calipari teams can play. You slow it down, they can play it. You rev it up, they can play it. But not too many. They've got big guys, they got shooters, etc. But not too many teams can do that. You look at Purdue in the Big Ten, and everything's based around the Mark Edney, who's 7'4". There's nobody on the West Coast that's any good. Nobody. I mean, the Pac-12, which had, I think, in its final year, which had Washington make the national championship game, they're going to be lucky to get 2 teams into the tournament this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a year ago they had 6.
Yeah. Well, here's the question. Now, you start thinking about that the Pac-12, just basketball, just maybe 2 teams this year. And Matt, we always ask this, who's the best conference in America? I think the Big 12, but we talked about playing on the road in college basketball. And I got a text over the weekend about the top 10 teams in college basketball. And it's interesting when you look at them, what their road records are. And I go in here and I said, I sent it to Brendan, but it's UConn on the road this year. Number 1, defending national champions. They're 3-2. Purdue, number 2, 3-2. North Carolina, they're 4-0. Now, I don't know, how good is the ACC? Houston, number 4, 2-2. Tennessee, 5, 2-2. And then go down and look at Kentucky. They're 2-2. Kansas, 2-3. 1-3 on the road, Matt, in the Big 12. Auburn, number 8, not for long. 2-3. They've lost 2 in a row. They're not getting blown out by 40 points, but they're not winning on the road these last 2 games. Arizona, number 9, 2-3, and Illinois, number 10 at 2-3. And you can say it's officials or whatever. Is it, Matt? Is it the depth perception of the rims? How do you prepare for those road games as a coach differently than maybe a fan might think?
Well, first of all, the thing that, when I coach basketball for over 26 years, the thing about the road is, man, it's you can't underestimate how important it is to sleep in your own bed and eat at your own cafeteria, whatever. And you take people out of their norms, right? And you travel. Now, I would have liked to have the flight schedule that some of these Power Fives had. I was on a charter bus, so my teams were going 4 or 5 hours in between days. So travel day was Saturday. We played Friday, Sunday, right? So from my perspective, I always built my teams around two categories. Turnover margin was very important to me, and defending the 3-point line. Two biggest things for me. A lot of people say rebounding. I agree. As long as we're not getting killed on the boards, if we're even on the boards, I can deal with that. But turnover margin is the very first stat I look at. If I'm going up against a Franz team and we're down in Florida somewhere and we have 17 turnovers and his team has 8, that's 9 extra possessions. That's huge. We always talk about turnovers in football. A lot of people don't talk about it in basketball. It means 9 times. I think 9 different times he got a shot up. I didn't. Man, in a close game, that kills you, And then the 3-point effect. If I can run you off the 3-point line, I have a greater chance. Another thing is you see these kids warming up, Franz. I know you used to coach some basketball. They're always warming up behind the line until they get probably into older coaching situations. And, you don't see people work on mid-range anymore. So if I run you off the line and you settle for a 16-foot jump shot, I've done my job. Regardless if it goes in, I've done my job. And that's just kind of some of the things that I preached. And honestly, later in my career, I was more of a junket. If you didn't have more than 2 shooters on the floor, you're going to see triangle and 2 from Coach Dean's team. We are going to triangle and 2 you. We're going to chase your best 2 shooters around the floor. We're going to have a monster at the middle. We'll put it at the foul line. You attack the middle. That person's going to help. As long as I can rebound on the backside with my lower 2, I'm going to beat you.
Like, another question for both of y'all. Franz, I'll ask you this. Do we have fewer 7-footers, 7'2", 7'3" guys than we used to? I mean, there's some teams, I think Duke last year had 2, maybe 3 over 7 feet tall. Ole Miss has a couple, but that's a question. The game, what is a center anymore? What's a forward? Everybody is a tweener, it looks like.
Well, this is why Florida is beating people this year, is that Todd Golden loaded up. Florida has 4 big guys in its rotation, and they're all really good. And you look at what happened against Georgia Saturday, when Micah Handlogton, 23 points, 17 rebounds. Florida out-rebounded Georgia 48 to 27. Wow. Florida leads the country in rebounding, and this is why the Gators can play with anybody. They got to learn how to finish. Don't know that they can do that. But I can tell you, and Matt hit on something else, turnover margin. Florida has the best point guard in the SEC, period. Zion Pullen is his name. 81 assists in 17 games, 18 turnovers. Wow. In SEC play, 31 assists, 5 turnovers. Yeah. He's had 1 turnover in his last 3 games. He's shooting 50% in SEC play. Doesn't turn the ball over. And he's hitting 87, 88% from the foul line.
Yeah.
That's what you got to have. You got to have a point guard who can score.
Yeah.
I don't think I think the day's gone by when you have to have a point guard that's going to get 25 a night. The greatest point guard in Duke history, everybody talks about Bobby Hurley. No, he wasn't. The greatest point guard in Duke history was a guy named Dick Grote, who ends up winning the MVP and the batting championship in the National League with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and then helps the St. Louis Cardinals win the 1964 World Series. Dick Grote averaged 28 points a game. I saw Pete Maravich, I went to Pete Maravich's basketball camp twice. I mean, his dad, Press, it was Pete's camp. Pete ran it. His dad had his name on it. It was kind of like LSU basketball. Coach Press Maravich. Press wasn't the coach. Pete was the coach.
Yeah.
Pete did everything. People don't believe the things Pete Maravich could do. You tell them today and they say, oh, that's not possible. There is not a point guard today that could sniff Pete Maravich's jock.
Yeah.
And that's a fact.
Yeah. You just don't see
if they'd had a 3-point shot at the time, Pete Maravich would have averaged 60.
Yeah, I mean, Matt,
Dale Brown did a computer simulation, put a 3-point line in there, and went through every game Pete played and came away with the conclusion Pete would have averaged 59.8 a game.
round it to 60. I like that.
Rounded up to 60.
I mean, that
unlike
is
Earl Leininger, I'm at a 90. I had a 95.75 average in his religion class, and he said that's a B plus. I said why isn't that a 96? He said because it ain't 96. 96 is 96. That's 95.75.
Man.
He said I've only given 5 B's in my life and 2 A's. You're one of my 5 B's. I went,
well, I was begging a professor one time for a grade, just like, please. And he goes, man, Rob, 20 years ago, I had guys doing this on their knees, begging me to keep their grades up so they wouldn't get drafted and sent to Vietnam. He goes, but you made it. I was like, thank you. but okay, this is a cool discussion. Now I want to get into some football stuff. And we watched that Lions game and we talked college, but that was brutal. And I've got Jeff Ticken and TK and David Hager, 2 of my friends. They're lifelong Lions fans. They didn't jump on it just this past year, but man, at that level, Travis Kelce, is he going to start a thing, Matt, where everybody wants to be a tight end and end up dating Taylor Swift? I mean, this is the tight end position. You hear coaches say we're gonna throw to the tight end. They get 5 of them on the roster. If they're a great blocker and they can catch, what is it about the tight end position that hardly anybody uses it? And then when you've got a good one, nobody can stop them.
Well, I know a little bit about tight ends, guys. Being from the state of Iowa, we're tight end U up there, University of Iowa. We got George Kittle was playing last night against Sam Laporta, both Hawkeyes. But quickly, I'm going to give you my take on yesterday. Let's go to Baltimore first. Baltimore imploded. Kansas City offense scored 17 points, guys. Baltimore, Lamar Jackson threw an interception in the end zone. Zay Flowers had 2 big mistakes. Number 1, he catches a big pass, gets up, spins the ball on the DB right by him, taunts him, 15 yards, takes that drive away, and then also dives for the end zone, and the ball is knocked out for a fumble. Kansas City was good defensively. That's probably the biggest thing Patrick Mahomes has this year is a defense, because until the playoffs, Travis Kelce wasn't the normal Travis Kelce. Look at his numbers, but he's been great in the playoffs. And the Lions, everyone is beating up Dan Campbell today by a couple 4th down decisions. But let me tell you what I love about Dan Campbell. He's very consistent. If you watch the Lions play all year, that's the way they play. No one wants to talk about the DB that had the ball hit him in the face mask that should have been a pick that drops into Brandon Ayuk's hands for a 55-yard gain, right? No one wants to talk about the drops that the receivers had in crucial situations.
Josh Reynolds had 3 of them.
3 in a row.
He did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. That was brutal.
And then the botched special teams on the goal line. I mean, it just
Yes.
It was like it was like predictable.
Yes. Yeah. And then Jair Gibbs, who's one of the finest rookie running backs,
Jameer Gibbs,
played the game.
Yeah.
I mean, gave San Francisco what they needed, and they capitalized. And listen, good for them. But at the end of the day, Dan Campbell made great calls all year and got that team there. They just had a terrible second half.
Well,
but
Jared,
you want to know something? Dan Campbell makes the right call. Jared Goff makes the right throw, and the same receiver drops 3 balls.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they end up having to punt 3 times.
That's
Jared Goff is a stud quarterback. I mean, that guy is so cool under pressure. And the Lions, he is young. What's 5th year in the NFL? They've got a franchise tag quarterback. That's how good. But Reynolds dropping those passes. I don't think it was Gibbs that fumbled the ball there in the second half. That was a critical fumble, but you knew that San Francisco in the second half was going to come out on fire. They had to. And Brock Purdy, he is so undervalued as a runner, and because of the way the NFL contracts are, he's only making $870,000. There's guys in college that have done way less that are already making, in the millions. That's the NFL salary structure. Now we got spring practice about to crank up here in the next couple of weeks. In SEC football, it never sleeps. And I'm looking at we're in the middle of basketball. We've got baseball coming up. I got to ask y'all, and whoever wants to answer this question, tackle it. But is the SEC in danger with the merger of the really it's a merger of the best of the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, Matt? I mean, we know how good Big Ten football is, but now here's the question. You're losing Harbaugh. They ran him out. And you've got Ryan Day. And other than losing 3 in a row to Michigan in his 5 years, he's lost to nobody else in the Big Ten. They've got 75% of the TV sets in America in the Big Ten footprint. I mean, they're always going to have somebody from the Big Ten that's got to be in the playoff.
Yeah, honestly, the Big Ten got a lot better if you just look at the footprint with Oregon and what they have returning now. Obviously, Washington lost their coach. Washington's roster basically kind of got decimated with the transfer portal after he left. I'll be curious to see what Lincoln Riley does, because he his Trojans took a step back this past year with supposedly the number 1 draft pick in the country, Caleb Williams. So we'll see if they can do any better. But, guys, I follow the Big Ten. The Big Ten West was horrible. It was horrible. In Michigan, and Michigan's down 20-13 with 4 minutes to go. And if Alabama can just defend that little swing pass to the running back out of the backfield, they win that doggone game. Yeah. And Ohio State, Ryan Day, they go up, they load up everything. But here's what's interesting about Ohio State. There's something broken there too, because Kyle McCord has a pretty doggone good first year at quarterback, and he leaves to go in the portal because he lost 1 game on the road to Michigan. Yeah, and maybe the best thing that's happened to Ohio State is Harbaugh leaving, like you said, Rob. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, the Big Ten. It's kind of like Harbaugh ended a streak, and let's see. Now, since 1990, the Big Ten has won. Let's see, you got Michigan in 97,
co-champions.
Ohio State 2001 and 2014. You got 4 national championships since 1990. Florida's got 3 alone since then. FSU's got 3 since then. Clemson's got 2 since then. Alabama's got 37 in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Georgia has 2. The SEC is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, the SEC had the best team in the country this year, and they panicked against Alabama and lost a ball game that they had no business losing. Absolutely no business at all losing. But had they played Michigan, they would have taken Michigan apart. And they're coming back. Carson Beck is coming back next year.
Yeah.
And I think he may be, from my perspective, if you're looking for a Heisman front runner to start the season, that's where you go. Right there. Completed 74% of his passes. And he's got people loaded up front and on the defensive side. They are loaded, and they're going to win a national championship. We talk about going to 12 teams. Okay, guess what? It makes the SEC better, because what you're going to end up seeing is this is what the Pac-12 commissioner was panicking about. Oh my gosh, the SEC will have the top 2 teams playing every year. Probably.
All right,
Probably.
Franz, let me throw this one at y'all. Jackson Dart, Matt, at Ole Miss. And Yancey Porter tonight, got to listen, 6 o'clock Central, Rebel Yell Hotline. It's a great show and all over Super Talk Mississippi. Jackson Dart. I think, Matt, it's Carson Beck, Jackson Dart. Those are definitely going to be two of your Heisman front runners. But that debate should be settled when they meet at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. Ole Miss doesn't play Alabama this year, but they do have Georgia in Oxford. How good is Jackson Dart? He's 19. He's going to turn 20 here pretty soon. And Ole Miss, via the portal, brought in 5 All-SEC defensive players. They are, as Yancey says, smelling blood. And I think Las Vegas has Ole Miss with the 8th best odds to win it all next year. They got to go do it, but they also better embrace these expectations and not wait for the other shoe to drop.
The thing I love about Jackson Dart, man, I just think he's a tough dude. I think he's a tough dude. I mean, he can do it with his arm and with his feet. I love how Lane runs offense. I think with them, it's going to come down once again. They made some really good additions, Rob, in the portal on defense. Can they win those games and make some stops defensively? Because that's been kind of the struggle they've had against the better teams has been defensively. But I tell you what, man, they went in the Peach Bowl and they just whooped up on Penn State. And, you know, I talked about Penn State earlier in the year and they let me down. I thought they were going to be better. Ole Miss, man, they're a top 5 preseason team in my opinion. But I'm with Franz. I still don't think they're going to be better than Georgia. That's just me.
Yeah, and everybody. Yeah, and Franz, throw this one. Tony Barnhart, we love him, Mr. College Football and the media guys. Awesome. He said it right when the 4 teams were selected. He goes, they got it right. But I'll say this, Bama goes from 8 to 4 by beating, and I had them to beat Georgia straight up. And Georgia falls from 1st to 6th. That was wrong. And Ben Troop was preaching on here. God love him. I love that guy. And he said, the reason, if you want to be honest, he said the reason Florida State got left out of the 14 playoff is that the ACC is perceived nationally to be down this year. So they said, well, you went 13-0 against a down league when compared to the SEC or the Big Ten. That's, I think, Franz, what happened. So you can pull. I'm strange. I'm an Auburn grad, but I pull for the SEC. I've got besides the fact I got friends at all these different schools and people that cover them and all that. But I love my school, but I don't spend time hating on other schools. I want you to be undefeated when my school plays you and beat you. But the SEC pulls for each other, unlike any other conference in America, friends. You don't see them saying Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten. I've never seen that. Or Pac-12, Pac-12.
Well, I'm going to invoke something that may sound a little political to some people, but I don't think a lot of people understand that here in the South, football was all we had. People do not understand the 100 years of the South that was after the Civil War. You take the state of Mississippi. The state of Mississippi, the number of men lost in the Civil War. Same with Alabama, and it killed their economy. I had a Mississippi history teacher named Miss Emma Butler, who she was 90 years old and still teaching. And they had what they called the old maid rule, which meant that if you were an unmarried teacher, you could teach until you died, which is what she did. Yeah. And people don't realize this kind of stuff happened throughout the South. And along comes, Georgia Tech and and Alabama with Frank Thomas, Wallace Wade, then Frank Thomas. And there's Coach Nealand, but General Nealand, well, it was Colonel Nealand when he started out, but Colonel Nealand from Tennessee. Football was all we had. And that's kind of how it got started here in the SEC. When you start talking about SEC loyalty,
Yeah.
As a group, you look at this, Kentucky, those kids coming out of the coal mines, and Bear Bryant up there turned them into winners. And of course, they had the foresight to fire him. Oh gosh,
yeah.
Which is, people say, well, he walked away. No, he didn't. When the president of the University of Kentucky, they have they have the sports banquet, and they give Coach Bryant a little package like this, and he opens it up, and it's a gold engraved cigarette lighter. They give one to Adolph Rupp, whose team didn't even get to play that year because they cheated. And you open it up, and by golly, there's the keys to a brand new Cadillac.
Yeah.
That means Bear looked at Mary Harmon. Mary Harmon looked at Bear. They said, "We go, bye-bye."
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a firing. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
But football was all we had here.
Yeah.
I grew up in an era, and Matt, I'm sure, I'm older than you, I think, but I grew up in an era in the 1960s when we're still making the transition from single platoon football, which was the end of the Ole Miss era. Johnny Vaught was the greatest coach in the SEC until we went to platoon. Bobby Dodd was the second best coach in the SEC until we went to platoon. Bear Bryant was able to go as a single platoon guy, win a national championship, and immediately make the transition to two platoon football, which Georgia Tech didn't do, which Ole Miss still, until Lane Kiffin came along, Ole Miss really hadn't recovered from that, because it was single platoon, you had enough players in the state. Two platoon, you don't.
Well, I'll throw this, talking about, and Matt, we do talk about history, and you go back to college football, November 6th, 1869, Rutgers 6, Princeton 4. It was a Big East Coast establishment sport until 1892, when Dr. George Petrie came from Charlottesville and brought the orange, the blue, and the white to Auburn, and the Georgia and the Southern schools, Tennessee, started the college football. And then in the early 1910, 13, 14, you had Iron Mike Donahue at Auburn, won 3 national championships then. You had John Heisman at Auburn, at Georgia Tech, and Clemson. I think he coached at Clemson 15 years, and that Rose Bowl team of Alabama in 1925.
Dan McGugan at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, you're right. And so Bama was the 4th or 5th choice that took that Rose Bowl. Nobody wanted to go out west and play that game. They played Washington. And on the way out there, it was like an 8-day train trip. It was a big deal. They were down 19-7 in the third quarter, won the game 20-19. On the way back, every stop the train made, there were thousands of people there waving flags and singing, playing Dixie, and just proud, because the South had been emasculated after that war. It was broken. Shelby Foote, the greatest author other than Bruce Catton on war between the states history ever. I mean, I knew him. I went over to his son's house one time in 2nd grade, and I saw him, and my mother said, "Did you know who that man is?" He was sitting in a chair smoking a pipe, writing, probably had a good scotch going. But he said one time about Mississippi, people, "Why are y'all still talking about that war?" He said, for many years after the war, 20 to 25% of the state budget in Mississippi went for artificial limbs for men who had fought in that war. So you're right. It is so, and the agrarians, the great writers in the 1920s at Vanderbilt, the fugitive poets, talked about how much the South was going to change as we began to move from the farms to the cities. And I think the South latched on to that. Y'all ever heard Andy Griffith when he talks about watching a football game
What
It
it
is-
was football.
Yeah, that was one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
I'm
But
sitting there
but-
drinking my big orange, and
yeah,
That was-
fellas, come
it
out
is-
from convicts, come out in stripes, talking about the officials. But Matt and Franz and Brendan, college football in the South, I think the South is so terrified of losing control that we will literally do anything because we don't ever want to be second best again, or made to feel that way. I've never felt that way, but it is the South was in college football is so big in the South that, like someone said to me, they went to a Southern Cal UCLA game. They said by the time we got back to the car, we were over it. You lose the Iron Bowl, you lose the Egg Bowl, you lose, Florida State, Florida. It may take days. It could take weeks. It was 6 weeks before one of my best friends from childhood could talk to me about kick six. 6 weeks. I mean, he couldn't do it. And I talked about 4th and 31 because I said, how can anyone be so stupid to only rush 2 and play patty cake? But damn, y'all just nailed it. I mean, basketball. Now that the SEC schools are getting really into basketball, I'm watching this thing. But the Big Ten, I mean, look at wrestling, Matt, in the Big Ten. It's their sport. Because of Title IX, the SEC schools dropped it. But Auburn had a coach named Sweet Umbaugh. He's in the Hall of Fame in Stillwater, Oklahoma, 39 SEC championships in wrestling. It's pretty cool. And his descendants now, Davidson and Umbaugh, are great lawyers, in Auburn. But college football, guys, like Tony Barnhart says, not even the adults can screw it up. I mean, I feel as bright, I feel as positive as ever about the future of college football, where we are. In spite of what people think, I remember the early 2000s when the NASDAQ fell 75, 80%. The death of equities, it's the end of the world as we know it. How'd that work out? Dow 36, 37,000 now, when the Dow was back then down way below. March 9th of 2009, the Dow was at 6,547 intraday. I mean, the media was telling us the respirator's on, the priest is in the room, get the kinfolks to say goodbye. And look how we bounced back. You watch. The South will save this country, and it'll save college football. And college football fans in the Big Ten, they ain't that much different. The Iowa people, if they get an offense, Matt, Iowa's going to be a pain in the ass to deal with. I don't understand why it's taken so long. But college football, it does. It gets bigger every year because more people are graduating, and then they're having kids. That's why the future's bright. And in spite of what people are telling us about NIL and the portal, look at the interest in the sport.
Well, let me say one thing to Matt about Iowa football. If Kirk Ferentz, his ideal quarterback would have no arms. He would have this great big mouth in which you could stuff the football, and you just run and you put this big, extra large helmet on so that he could go like a battering ram straight forward. That would be Kirk Ferentz's ideal quarterback. He would not have an arm, would not be in Kirk Ferentz's world, the forward pass should be illegal again, like it was in 1910 when Newt Rockne and Gus Reyes basically invented the forward pass. But, it's unbelievable that Kirk Ferentz has yet to figure out that it is legal to throw it on first down or second down. It's not something that's only restricted to 3rd and 33.
Yeah.
You're allowed to throw it before that.
Yeah.
It's been a rough patch the last few years offensively for us Hawkeye fans, friends. I will tell you this, because we're all big on history. The year that Bo Jackson won the Heisman Trophy,
Yep.
The runner-up to Bo Jackson was a quarterback from the University of Iowa, Chuck Long.
Yep.
Yes, he
who
was.
played under Hayden Fry, who in 1979 came to Iowa City and said, "We are going to scratch where it itches." Hayden was a big-time offensive guy. If you remember, friends, he was one of the first coaches that stood up as tight ends. They didn't have their hand in the dirt. They stood up, and he threw the ball everywhere. And
From an SMU guy.
Correct.
And then, but he played his college football at Baylor.
Correct. And historically, I just want you to know this. I moved to the South in 91. I guess in the Mid-South. I'm not sure Memphis, obviously, is.
It's the South.
But compared to the cornfields I detasseled when I was a kid, it's the South. All right. So I came down here and watched my first college football game and got a taste of the SEC. And I called my buddies. I said, dude, we were all wrong. The foot speed, the pure speed on this field is like nothing I had ever seen. And I'm not trying to plead ignorance here, but some of the problems with us in the Midwest is we grew up in Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler's world when it was 3 yards and a cloud of dust football, friends. And I came down here in 91 and I said, guys, I understand. And friends, you're spot on that stat with the national championships. You know, you got Ohio State with a few, Michigan with a couple, and the rest of the world is all the South. I mean, except for maybe whenever Pete Carroll was at USC, right? Other than that, it was just SEC-based, Southern-based, athletes everywhere, tough to defend. I don't know. I can't defend my Big Ten at all, guys. I can't.
I'll tell you a quick story about Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll, the Buffalo Bills had a coach named Kay Stevenson, who was famous because he was the backup for Steve Spurrier at Florida during the Heisman years. Ended up having a better pro career than Steve Spurrier did. Ends up being going to become a head coach. He goes to the Buffalo Bills. He brings in Perry Moss, and brings in as his offensive line coach a former high school coach from Gainesville named Jim Nyblack. And Perry Moss and Jim Nyblack are two football gypsies who coached in the World Football League, the U.S. Football League, NFL Europe, the Arena League, the Continental Football League, World Football League 1 and 2, and they were all together. They were together the whole time. They were like joined at the hip almost. They have this great big house in Buffalo, and they make as their roommates a guy named Pete Carroll and a guy named Jim Haslett become their roommates because they're single at the time. And Nyblack pulls Pete Carroll aside and says, "You know what? You're better suited to be a college football coach." You know, and he started talking from a Southern perspective, and he said, "This is the way it is in the South, and you got to find a situation that you can make it like that."
Yeah.
Pete Carroll made Southern Cal into an SEC football team.
He did.
And that's how they survived. That's how they won it all. He starts bringing in all this speed from the SEC and stuff like that, combines it with the quarterbacks they've got out there, and look what happened to him. And you talk about a guy that got railroaded by the NCAA, this crap with Reggie Bush. Give me a break. As if, the problem is the NCAA, what we've always called selective enforcement. The NCAA targeted Pete Carroll and decided to run him out of college football. Yeah. Just like they targeted Jim Harbaugh.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
Just like they targeted Charlie Pell. Yeah. And ran him out.
Yeah. When they want to get you out, they come at you and they show no mercy. And I mean, it is unbelievable what they do. And look, we're about to wrap up. I know Matt and we're changing some of the links of the shows, varying stuff like that as we're broadcast live here. But want to say something about all of our sponsors. We're redoing some commercials and everything like that. But get out today. make it a point. Get out to Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. HewlettandDunn.com. Second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast. Over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots, but great looking women's clothes. Again, everything Duckhead makes, they've got it. They sell all the line of the great Barber clothing. Pendleton, Schaefer Outdoors. Schaefer, they're the wardrobe consultants to the cast on Yellowstone, the modern version, obviously not 1883 or 1923, but love Hewlett and Dunn, all of our sponsors. And again, make a point, get to the Vitamin Shop, 5338 Goodman Road in Olive Branch, Mississippi. Open Monday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m., 8 p.m. Sundays, 10:30 a.m., 7 p.m. Whole lot to cover this week, guys. Bunch of stuff happening in sports. Tune in what we're doing. We're making some changes, upgrades, Sidelines Sports Network. But we're going to be the place where you go to gather under one big umbrella, under one big roof. A lot of synergy happening. Brendan, what else we need to tell them about how they can subscribe to all this stuff?
Just make sure you smash that subscribe button. We'll say goodbye to our guests. Thank you very much for coming in, Mr. Dean. Can I call you Mr. Dean? It feels more
Coach.
Listen, Brendan, man, after I've seen those videos of you and your dog, you can call me anything, bro. I love your dog.
He's so cute, man. We'll talk about Sammy one day. He's got quite a story where he used to escape, and I had to like put out Facebook ads to find him. It's like APB, mess with me in marketing, I will end you. I had that dog hunted down. The one lady was going to steal him. She had him hunted down. Poor woman. She's afraid to walk out the damn door with that dog because I had so many Facebook ads, Instagram ads. It was about a year and a half ago. She finally called me. Said, "Oh, I didn't know. I just saw. I just checked off." I go, "Honey, I had them posted old school on the telephone poles, the whole thing." Yeah, I had a street team working it. And I said, they had no chance of stealing that dog. And 5 days later, he came back to me. They called it. "Oh, I got your dog." Like almost 6 days. I thought he was gone.
We love all the dogs, man. Hey, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world, folks. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Don't ever forget to take an opportunity to help somebody out because words and actions go a long way. See you tomorrow, folks. Thanks for watching.
Than ever, it is so important to shop local and to buy American. For 60 years, Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company has been on the historic Collierville Square, and we strive to sell made in the USA products when available. With over 7,000 pairs of Western boots and work boots in stock for men and women, come and see our huge selection of clothing, jeans, and accessories from top brands made in the USA. Please support local business and come shop with us at Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company. God bless the USA.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.